Fairy Legends and Luminaries. I'm Julie and welcome to another episode of Booksmart. Today's book is called Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up by Abigail Shrier. I wanted to like this book. In this day and age, we have it the easiest it's ever been, yet to listen to young people talk, you'd think their lives were awful. The world isn't perfect and never will be, but come on. Compare our current existence with that of the Holocaust or D-Day or the Cold War when students hid under desks during nuclear bomb drills. My mother even spoke of her childhood and early teen days when the laundry took up an entire day with the wringer washer. Think about that for a second. All day doing laundry. Now we get upset if our clothes aren't washed and dried within an hour and then whine because there's nobody to put our laundry away for us. And don't even get me started on Little House on the Prairie days. Bad Therapy intrigued me on many levels. And while Shrier did provide some provocative questions, her political agenda got in the way. Let me start by admitting that I steer clear of political books. I avoid authors that are politically motivated. I don't agree with either extremist side, right or left. I think they're both crazy, that if everyone takes about 10 steps, okay, probably more like 20 steps toward the middle, society wouldn't be so polarized or hypocritical or batshit crazy. I didn't know Abigail Shrier, and I still didn't research her after reading the book, but I knew there was a possibility that despite her investigative journalist title, that she might not be as objective or thorough as I would like or expect. Unfortunately, my fear was accurate. But Shrier presents a palpable problem we have in today's society, no question about it. Adult children moving back in with their parents? Yikes. Student behavioral problems in the classroom because students think the world revolves around them and they don't have to do anything that is challenging or makes them uncomfortable? Yikes again. Trigger warnings on everything, safe places in college classrooms, and bed rotting. Ask Charlotte Perkins Gilman how that rest cure worked out for her. Triple yikes. Shrier attempts to explain that what is happening to our children and teenagers and young adults is all the result of bad therapy, an overabundance of psychologists and counselors that have taken over our children's lives, upending parenting styles, ruling the schools, and placing a ridiculous amount of focus on our children's feelings. So let me start with the basis of the problem so you have an understanding of what Shrier is getting at. The rising generation has received more therapy than any prior generation. Nearly 40% of the rising generation has received treatment from a mental health professional, compared with 26% of Gen Xers. 42% of the rising generation currently has a mental health diagnosis, rendering normal increasingly abnormal. 1 in 6 U.S. children aged 2 to 8 years old has a diagnosed mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder. That's 2 to 8 years old. More than 10% of American kids have an ADHD diagnosis, double the expected prevalence rate based on population surveys in other countries. Nearly 10% of kids now have a diagnosed anxiety disorder. Teens today so profoundly identify with these diagnoses, they display them in social media profiles alongside a picture and a family name. She shows us a lot of statistics that show us the current state of our children. If I had a nickel every time I heard someone say, I have anxiety, I would be rich. Being uncomfortable does not mean you have anxiety. I'm all for eliminating the stigma of mental illness, but we've crossed over into bragging about it. And by doing that, we're using it as a crutch, a reason we don't have to do whatever it is that we don't want to do. Amber from Teen Mom is the extreme example of this. She loves to tout her borderline personality disorder and uses it as an excuse as to why she's a bad mother and a spouse abuser. I haven't watched that show for years, so I can only imagine how bad it's progressed. My students readily tell me that they have ADHD, and that's why they cannot take notes or cannot do their schoolwork without listening to music. And these ADHD students are usually on medication. Doesn't sound like that medication is doing its job then. Shrier states that one of the reasons for all this nonsense is because therapists, parents, and teachers are constantly asking kids, how are you feeling? Such a question will almost always lead to a negative response because most of the time nobody feels all that great. Plus, we should focus on task orientation instead, focusing on what we need to do rather than state orientation, which is focusing on how we feel about whatever it is that we are doing. So let me kind of read you what she talks about in regards to this and how we feel. If you track a person's emotions over the course of a day or even a week, Lyndon told me, happiness is actually a very rare emotion, statistically speaking. Of our 60,000 wakeful seconds each day, only a tiny percentage are spent in a state we would call happy. Most of the time, we are simply okay or fine, trying to ignore some minor discomfort, feeling a little tired, run down, upset, stressed out, irritated, allergic, or in pain. Regularly prompting someone to reflect on their current state will, if they are being honest, elicit a raft of negative responses. I asked Lyndon what he would expect to see in a society where kids were constantly encouraged to heed their feelings. If you start your day by asking yourself whether you are happy, the result can only be that you're not happy. And then you think you need help to become happy. And then you go to a psychotherapist and he'll make you really unhappy in the end. But why can't the answer always be, I'm happy? Because it will never be true, Lyndon says. And time spent answering this question only pushes us further from any tangible goal and the satisfaction of having completed one. So this is a fascinating idea. I would say most of the time, I'm probably somewhat happy when I'm not in a bout of hypochondriac panic that I have a blood clot, a brain tumor, or cancer, or those dreaded Monday mornings, especially if it's raining. Yeah, those aren't my favorite. I think the book paints this rather darkly, though, suggesting happiness is a rarity, but I do understand how the constant asking may tempt complaints and negativity. Shrier describes how affirming and accommodating kids' worries only make them worse. Yes, I get it. We need to be uncomfortable at times, choose such discomfort, so we actually get used to it. That's why I have students in my classroom that look at me in disbelief when I say no. Nobody tells them no anymore, like nobody. Part of the premise of Shrier's argument is the more we dwell on all these feelings, the worse our children will feel. She describes studies regarding PTSD that talk therapy isn't always successful for everyone, that sometimes therapy makes it worse, that we jump quickly to conclusions regarding a child's mental health. Just because a child is anxious about something doesn't mean they have generalized anxiety disorder. Just because a child is sad and despondent about something doesn't mean they have a depressive disorder. I'm on board with what Shrier is talking about. Psychotherapy made Marilyn Monroe worse, not better. I think we all know people who have gone to therapy and they were more healthy and adjusted prior to therapy than after. But then Shrier throws in climate anxiety. Apparently, this is a reason kids today are suffering anxiety, yet once these same kids are out of school, they admit that climate change never caused them anxiety. Unfortunately, Shrier brought this up on page 27. I'm rolling my eyes. Yes, I think describing young people's concern over climate change is exaggerated. They only care for as long as it's trending on social media, then they're more worried about what lip gloss or video game is trending on TikTok. I'm guessing Shrier probably doesn't believe in climate change at all, and that's why she threw it in there. The only good news is that she spends little time on it, or any other topic for that matter. Each chapter has multiple sections, with most sections under 4 pages long. Some are barely even 2 pages long. I feel like I'm reading an encyclopedia entry with all these points, yet none of them are fully developed, which overall weakens Shrier's main point. She devotes a portion of her book to schools, which starts out okay, but then she throws out all these underdeveloped conspiracies. Let me read you a good part that Shrier talks about in relation to schools and student behavior. Schools across the country are reporting far worse behavioral outbreaks in recent years. Ask anyone who has worked in some of America's failing public schools, and nearly all of them will tell you the same thing. The biggest problem isn't the quality of the teachers, one teacher wrote in the New York Post in 2018. It's the behavior of the kids. Angry, disruptive, disrespectful kids whose behavior is out of control. Every public school teacher I interviewed said the same. Kids' behavior has deteriorated over the last decade. Christine, who oversees social emotional programming in high schools in Oregon, said that rates of student dysregulation have exploded since at least 2016. Kids have utter meltdowns, tantrums, screaming, yelling, throwing things, crying, threatening to kill themselves, cursing at teachers, just general bad behavior, she recounted. Teachers I talked to all noted a rise in tantrums, violence, screaming in a teacher's face, throwing objects around the classroom, slamming doors, catcalling, all in the last decade. Kids seem to exercise no control over their behavior, teachers told me. And a large part of the problem, they said, is a school regime that demands no self-discipline from students, believing such expectation unreasonable, if not unevolved. So as you may already know, for the last 9 years, I've taught at a juvenile detention center. So what I see is not from the typical classroom point of view, nor from the typical student point of view. However, I get students from all over and from many different states, some even in elementary school. Social emotional learning has taken over and academics now suffer. Students can't tell me anything about the Holocaust and can't even guess the appropriate time period of the Civil War, but they always pass the pretest in health for the unit on mental health. Once again, Shrier brings up an excellent point, but then doesn't develop it. Her sources are questionable. I think she found her right-wing professional friends who then say stuff like, one student didn't even know how to go buy himself a sandwich. In every job across the world, we can all tell shocking stories of the stupidity we encounter, but I'd like to think that such stupidity and ignorance is the exception, not the rule. Shrier uses these anecdotes as viable source material with nothing else to go with it. She has just over a page on repressed memories, the 1990 scandal, as she calls it, that resulted in false accusations. And that's it. She doesn't tell you about the McMartin trial, nor the satanic panic that even affected how police and the FBI investigate, nor the suggestive nature of the therapist. She doesn't bring up that much of this all stemmed from Sybil, the whole trend of multiple personality disorder that is actually an incredibly rare condition, yet everyone was being diagnosed with it in the early 80s. All of this would give credence to her point, which she doesn't state very well at all, that our current mental health protocol is driven by trends, just like everything else in our world. Shrier says nothing about how the DSM is constructed, how family physicians use that to diagnose, and these same family physicians have little training in mental health and how to treat it, how a lot of it is just arbitrary. She obviously did not read Pathological, which I did a Booksmart episode on last summer. There is so much that Shrier could have used to strengthen her argument, but that would have required her to research outside of her own political agenda. Shrier paints a picture of parents being bamboozled by counselors and sinister teachers, that these outsiders are exerting power and pressure on kids that take away parents' ability to raise their children. I'm sure some parents out there have horror stories to tell, but I don't think that's the rule. That's the exception. She acts like schools can't wait to call CPS on parents. She compares her childhood with that of her children. She grew up in the same generation as I did, with the latchkey kids and parents who didn't micromanage your homework or even show up to all your practices and games and performances. She presented limited research on why parents should give their children independence and space. Once again, she brings up some excellent points, but she doesn't fully develop any of it. She never suggests that part of the reason Gen X parents parent the way they do is because we wish our parents would have shown a little more interest in our lives and maybe even occasionally asked how we felt about things. But Shrier won't admit to such things, nor does she question anything outside her viewpoint. And then the last part of her book has nothing to do with bad therapy. She blames a lot of what's happening in today's children's lives on technology, even suggesting kids can suffice with flip phones and that schools shouldn't allow any phones on the premises. I would love to see how that would fly. Schools can't tell my kid what he can't have at school. While Shrier is correct that our technology and screen time and social media have all stunted society in so many ways, how does that connect with her bad therapy premise? She even states that teenagers save a stockpile of other social media posts just in case so they can use it against each other later. That's terrifying if that is the rule and not the exception. Bad Therapy is a badly written and a poorly developed book with questionable sources. And it's too bad, too, no pun intended, because there is something going on with all these safe spaces and don't dare offend anybody, and the world must cater to our sensitive feelings. If Shrier would have developed her argument fully using reliable sources that went beyond the surface and avoided her own political agenda, she could have very well proven her point that thinking all children suffer from trauma is an exaggeration, that schools have integrated way too much social emotional learning into classrooms that have taken away precious time from actual learning, and that parents need to wear the pants in the family, that they're in charge, not their oversensitive children. But instead, her book reads like a horrible Facebook page with anecdotes from Bob down the street and some right-wing pediatrician. Only read Bad Therapy if you do so objectively. Out of the 250 pages of text, maybe 30 pages bring up some really good points and ask some very intriguing questions. Research those ideas on your own, using reliable sources that are as unbiased as possible. Otherwise, if you're on the extreme left, you're going to reject every single thing in the book. And if you're on the extreme right, you're going to declare, I knew it. Before we can even begin to discuss bad therapy, either the book or the process of therapy, perhaps we need to relearn objective listening and thinking skills, tolerance of ideas not in agreement with our own, and to stop spending so much time and energy worrying about what everyone else is doing. Thanks for watching. As always, my goal at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.